afternoon. It's a beautiful day to be alive, and it's a beautiful day to stream and hang out. So it's a Saturday. It's 4 p.m. that I'm starting this live, and we got a Sam Harris and Don Lemon conversation that we're gonna learn from, react to, and add some potential commentary to it. I don't listen to Don Lemon very often. His takes seem pretty outrageous. But I do listen to Sam Harris quite often, and I find Sam to be quite insightful and wise. So I like listening to him and have him sort of go toe to toe with certain people, even though kind of I think Sam and Don are on the same side of the aisle. I think both are left leaning, but I do think they have differing ideas on certain things. Like race or white men or things of that nature. So we're going to get into that conversation, I assume, just based on the title. Haven't watched it, don't know what's going to happen, but I'm ready to jump in and see the conversation. So that's the introduction. Outside of my name is Aaron Mashbitz. I host a podcast called Something for Everybody. If you want to check it out, I stream quite often, like 4 or 5 days a week. So wherever you're at right now, follow, like, subscribe, and join me on these streams as we try and build this community up. So thank you very much, and let's jump in.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Don.
Yeah, good to see you.
It's nice to know that rumors of the infringement of the First Amendment in this society of ours aren't just rumors. We have the man in flesh here.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that because, and I'm gonna couch it in the State of Our Union, because in a few days Donald Trump is going to deliver the official State of the Union. The one the first time wasn't a real one. So, what's your assessment on the State of Our Union? How is America doing?
Whoa.
What's that?
I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, Nina just built an app.
Impossible.
Nina can't code.
Interesting.
Well, not well. I'm quite worried about the state of our democracy and the state of our media landscape that has become a kind of hallucination machine. I mean, it's apart from anything that we might talk about or criticize with respect to the Trump administration or the great unraveling of American stature in the world and the growing corruption and kleptocracy. And I mean, all of that is awful and worth worrying about. But behind all of that is this basic fact that something like half the country, doesn't see any of that, right? I mean, at least 40% of Americans seem to think that things are going pretty well and not much is at stake. So any topic we might touch here, whether it's infringements of civil liberties or corruption, the looming risk of disorder, as America retreats from its leadership role, much of the country, I mean, something like half the country, either doesn't care or is totally oblivious to these concerns. I think things are going well, and the more stuff that Trump covers in gold in his immediate environment, that's all a sign of progress.
Well, I don't know if it's half the country. I think it's like 30-some% of the electorate, and which I believe a dwindling number now, even more so now, if you believe the polling. But can I just go back before we move on? You said you called it a hallucination machine. What did you mean by hallucination machine?
Well, it's increasingly clear that when you look at what people do and say they believe, and the kinds of political intentions they apparently have, we're just not dealing with the same sets of facts, right? I mean, I'm sure all of your listeners have had this experience to one or another degree, where you're talking to someone, and it's proving increasingly hard to converge on just a basic account of what's happening in the world, whether it's
shared sense of reality or shared sense of facts.
Yeah, and it's strangely, this is true even around events that are among the most witnessed events in human history, right? I mean, now we have video of everything, right? We have video of everything, or many things, certainly from three sides, right? So you have someone killed in Minneapolis, and there's just a fundamental breakdown along political lines around what happened there. Again, even when you can see what happened from three sides, so it's very disorienting.
What do you see? What happened? You said even when you can see. Do you mind if I ask you what?
That is the paramount problem with our attention economy, right? We can all sort of see the same footage, but our perception of it and our interpretation of it is however it is for us. And we're going to lean towards whatever side we're currently on. And that's the lens we see that footage, and it can distort our view and the truth. And then it creates the division even wider and wider because I see it this way because I'm on this side, or I see it this way because I'm on this side. It's increasingly rare to see someone with nuance in their sort of discussion or commentary of culture, because that doesn't get as much clicks as saying he was murdered or, abolish ICE or whatever the sort of conversation topic is. It usually lies somewhere in the middle, but the middle ground doesn't garner as much attention. Everything in our economy is about attention, because if you don't have attention, then no one watches your show. And then if no one watches your show, you can't make any money. If you make no money, then you really have no influence. And so it becomes increasingly challenging to do that. I think, yeah. So that's just my opinion on just being someone who creates content and doesn't have a massive platform, obviously. I try to do that. And so I'm willing to sort of wait a little bit longer before I don't know what, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying about my platform is not important, but that's the conversation you see in the media, in the conversation with podcasts, on media television or network television, or on podcasts, or whatever the case may be. Here we go.
You see when you look at it.
You're talking about the killing of Preddy,
Alex
or
Preddy,
Good?
yeah, or Renee Good.
Yeah. I mean, but both of those. I mean, the Preddy one was awful and illegitimate for yet another reason. But I mean, both were clearly unwarranted killings, right? I mean, this is a highly unprofessional police force that has been marshaled by Trump for reasons that are, perhaps are yet to be seen, right? I mean, I think it's rational to worry that this isn't all about immigration concerns. However, you might agree or disagree with those concerns. I mean, that there are other reasons, there are other uses to which a vast Praetorian Guard could be put, and I think it's reasonable to worry about ICE generally. But clearly, these guys are not being vetted or recruited or trained in ways that are producing normal police outcomes, right? I mean, these were just awful killings that were. I mean, the Preddy one was interesting to me because it was awful in precisely a way that the right has been worrying about or pretending to worry about for as long as I've been alive. I mean, here was a case of a legally armed citizen who did nothing wrong. I mean, certainly nothing provocative in the moment that warranted his manhandling, much less his execution. And yet, he was killed. And the amazing thing was that to a man and woman, everyone in the Trump administration began speaking about this killing, not only as though it were justified, et cetera. He's a domestic terrorist. He's an assassin. Was bent upon massacre. All of these just an avalanche of lies, patent falsehoods within moments of this becoming public knowledge. But the most shocking thing to me was that all of them disavowed the Second Amendment explicitly. Right. I mean, you literally had Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, speaking as though the Second Amendment didn't even exist.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have in this country millions, probably 10 million at a minimum, people for whom the Second Amendment is just the central plank of their political religion. Right. I mean, this is when you ask when you ask proper gun nuts why they have guns and why they need so many and why they train with them and fetishize them and think about them day and night. Why it really is the center of their culture and their politics. It's not for home defense. It's not because they're worried about the spikes in crime in their area. It's always a story about the need to retain the ability to protect yourself against a government that grows tyrannical. And the first sign of this tyranny would be a hostility toward the Second Amendment, right? And here we had a federal government explicitly disavowing the right to bear arms legally and describing the killing of Preddy as totally warranted, because if you are within the vicinity of federal law enforcement and you're armed, that may well be your death sentence. That was how the president spoke, J.D. Vance spoke, Kristi Noem. It was unbelievable that the
Still are
government
speaking.
of America didn't go berserk over this.
And that is, I don't know if you would call it cognitive dissonance, or I call it blind ideology. People who are so blinded by their own ideology that they can't see or think straight. But Sam,
thanks to Restore, Primetime is back.
This is my time.
I didn't want to be bold.
I get like a.
But that's what I was just kind of saying. It's like you could hear this exact same conversation between two people on the other side, on the right side, and they see a totally different view. They see Alex Preddy being dangerous and instigating and shouldn't being in that spot and should have done this and shouldn't have done that. I streamed another video where a woman explained kind of his situation a couple weeks or days before, whatever the case may be, but they see totally different things through the lens of how they view the world. And this is the problem we have now in our current society, is that one people on, on this side think they're right. These people think they're right. And sort of the majority of Americans kind of live in the middle, where we try to be moderate about where we are. But if you want to gain attention, you have to be on the extreme side of each aisle. And that's where all the division is caused, because you could have two different people that, the Don Lemon and the Sam Harris version on the right, and they see this whole thing totally different. And it's kind of amazing to watch happen, but it's really hard for the average American to kind of distill what I'm supposed to believe, where the battles I'm supposed to be fighting, who has my back, who doesn't have my back, what's this all about? And so it becomes quite challenging. And so then, you get tribalistic and, things like that. And then you don't want to care about the other side or listen to the other side. And then, we get to the place where we're currently at now, where I have to be right and I have to win, and talking about the side that we're on.
I get a lot of criticism when I say this, but isn't this moment exactly the moments when you see, those ICE agents out violating people's due process rights, busting car windows, dragging women across the ice or across? Isn't that what the Second Amendment was written for, a tyrannical government?
Yeah, I mean, and you can imagine, if had this occurred under the Biden administration or a Kamala Harris administration, or say nothing of a Barack Obama administration, you would see. I think you would see something like an insurrection. At a minimum, you would see every deployment of ICE and Border Patrol shadowed by hundreds of guys carrying AR-15s in protest, right? You would not. There's no way gun culture would have taken this from a left-leaning administration. It's unthinkable, and unless they're all total hypocrites. Unless none of them believe what they say they believe. But we just know that's not true.
You don't think they're total hypocrites?
I don't think. I think. You've seen. Again, we're talking about Timothy McVeigh level craziness in defense of the Second Amendment. When you look at how these guys get radicalized around events like Waco and Ruby Ridge and just grazing rights for cattle on federal land, right? There have been standoffs with the federal government where you get maniacs with guns out there drawing a line at obvious risk, potential risk to themselves and to everyone around them. They show up with long guns, with lots of ammunition, in defiance of federal law. I think absolutely we would have seen that had this come in another context.
Yeah, so that's total hypocrisy. Look at the difference in responses to Kyle Rittenhouse, who actually killed people, and the response to, sadly, Charlie Kirk's death, right? Who should not have died that way. I think most people on the left, if you did not like Charlie Kirk, or if you just didn't like what he stood for, they said, I don't think he should have died this way. But you basically had an administration saying that this guy, his death was warranted and that he was some sort of terrorist and he deserved to die.
Now you're talking about Preddy.
Yeah.
There's one major difference between a talk that gets 4,000 views versus a talk that gets 4 million views, and it's not.
The role that hyperpartisanship is playing in our public communication about everything is really a kind of cognitive and emotional disease at this point. I mean, it's just that there's just so little integrity on display. I mean, when your side does the thing that you've been complaining about the other side doing for years, you should notice that it's still obnoxious and untenable and indefensible, right? So if you pretended to care about the contents of
If you don't have the ability to call out your own side, um, then you don't stand on values and you don't stand on morals. And all this side and tribalistic talk is kind of the problem in itself. But it's like if you have a really close friend, you have a really close friend, and that friend starts doing bad stuff or going off the rails or starts not doing the things he said he's going to do, and you notice kind of lying. And if you just ignore it and always talk good about him and never say a bad word about him, it's like you're not really being his friend. Now, you shouldn't talk smack behind your friend's back or talk negatively about him to other people behind his back. But what you should do, what a good friend does, is hold them accountable. It stares them in the eye and says, "Hey, you're not, holding up your end of the bargain of this friendship. You are not holding yourself accountable. You are falling down a path that I don't agree with, that I want to help you climb out of." That's what a great friend does. And if you, again, can't do that on your own side when they do something bad or do something horrible or say something stupid or whatever the case may be, and you just agree, or ignore, then that's really the issue that we run into. And I guess Sam was about to say that, but that's at least what I think, or I don't know what Sam's about to say, obviously, but here we go.
Hunter Biden's laptop, right?
Right.
Because he was, he had some, sinecure he didn't deserve over there in Ukraine, earning millions of dollars from, from a board seat that clearly he was trading in influence in some sense, right? And you're parsing those emails that suggest that maybe Joe Biden got a kickback there, and that's just the level of awfulness there is worth it's worth talking about nothing else in that election cycle, right? This is the thing that should decide an election. It's so awful. Well, if you believe that, right of center, surely you care that we now have a president who has earned billions of dollars
Exactly.
simply pimping out the foreign policy and tariff policy of the United States for his personal advantage. Right? I mean, literally selling out great parts of American policy and reputational influence, destroying alliances just to grift for himself and his family to the tune of now billions of dollars. Surely that matters to you. But of course, right of center is crickets.
Yeah, but that's the thing. And again, a total hypocrisy. I don't know what you're the neuroscientist. Is it? I know you're not a psychologist, but what is it that allows people to be able to sort of twist themselves into a pretzel for some sort of weird logic that makes it make sense when it's Donald Trump, or if it's because, or if it's a conservative, but mainly it's Donald Trump and MAGA in this instance.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is it reveals that people simply care about winning for their side. I mean, it's just pure tribalism. It's pure in group solidarity and out group.
I also think there's human beings have like an innate need to have a sense of belonging. They have to have a sense of belonging. And so if I can belong to this group, whether it be a political, side or whatever, then I'm going to say whatever I possibly can to make sure I'm still in that group and I belong to that group, because I've been on the outside of a group where I've been lonely and by myself. And that's a horrible feeling. Now I have a group and I connect with people. So I'm going to say and do anything that keeps me inside that group. That's a human instinct, evolutionarily, about sort of survival. And we still need it now because we're not any different than we were back then. We just have sort of modern technology that makes it more challenging for our life and easier and more convenient. That's a conversation for another time, potentially. But there is this like dying sense of need to belong. And if I belong to a group and I don't want to be thrown out of that group, then I'm going to go along with everything that happens all the time, no matter what. So I can't call out my own side or hold them accountable, or, then I, have these sort of hypocritical views like Sam is talking about. It happens on all sides, both sides, all the time. That's why the political discourse is not very good and not very productive. And we've been churning out horrible presidential candidates, and no one wants to be president. And where do we go from here? And tons of Americans are struggling, and all these types of things. Let's continue.
Contempt, and it's not. There's no real, in this case, even pretense of a connection to policy outcomes that matter, or much less any kind of ethical integrity, right? I mean, there's no real commitment to the common good. This is just people trying to win. And this is a problem on the left too. I mean, as you know, I was very critical of leftist identity politics and so-called wokeness and the way that bent democratic politics. And I certainly hope we're recovering from all of that. And I think we will have to fully recover from that to reliably win in 2028, because I think the country is properly allergic to the extremes we reached on the left. But it's the right. It's not even right to call them conservative now. It's just the MAGA personality cult, and populism on the right is ascendant now, and we're dealing with the consequences.
I tried everything: coffee, Pomodoro, and binaural beats, but nothing stuck until.
So then, what do you anticipate the things that are they? Did you think that it was going to get so bad so quickly? Did you see any of this coming? Or do you find yourself genuinely surprised by this moment? I'll let you know what I think, but I want to hear what you think about that.
Well, on some level, both are true. I mean, I guess I'm surprised by my seemingly bottomless capacity for surprise, right? I mean, because on paper, I anticipated a lot of this. I mean, I've been worried about Trump and Trumpism for a decade, and I certainly saw how corrosive all of this would be of our institutions and of our political conversation, our ability to cooperate and coordinate on any important project. I mean, again, the details are always shocking, right? What people will put up with, what people will justify, what people will avert their eyes from. I mean, all of that continues to be shocking. I just don't know where the line is for Republicans now. I mean, I really think the line may not exist. I mean, the line I'm talking about is just what could Trump do? What could he say? What could he announce that he intends at some point in the future that would be so shocking, so appalling to everyone that you would begin to hear Republicans say, okay, I didn't think he would do that, right? That is obviously awful. Everyone who's been criticizing this guy for years and worrying about how far he might go, they were right. I was wrong. This is the brink that we have to pull back from. What could he do to accomplish that change in attitude and posture? I don't know if there's anything. Honestly, I do not know if for 30% of America, I don't know if there's anything.
Well, there are certain people now who were outspoken about their support for Trump that now have sort of taken that back. But Sam is right in regards. There are some people who are Trumpers until they die, no matter what, and that's unfortunate and scary.
That would accomplish that.
But do you think that in the definition, the original definition of woke, isn't that what it meant, is to be aware of such inequities and the possibility of, if you elect someone like that, like Donald Trump, then this is what you can expect. So perhaps the people who some call woke, I understand you think it went too far, understood the moment and was aware and awake about what was to come, which is now reality.
Yeah, well, whatever it meant initially, the meaning became indelible in a different sense, right? I mean, just it's now a term of disparagement for everyone who's not, still grasping at the original intended meaning, right? It's just if you don't like woke, I mean, I think the larger footprint, the more generic issue is identity politics, right? I just think we have to get out of the politics of identity. I mean, the thing that was always predictable, but nonetheless surprising, was that if you're going to insist upon the permanent validity and even necessity of identity politics for Black and brown people, that was eventually going to produce a counter reaction, which would be an identity politics for white people, right?
Wasn't that what we're in now? Identity politics for white people?
Yeah. It finally did produce it, and it's as odious as you might have expected.
But wait, hold on. You think that is that's what started white identity politics? Isn't white identity politics the whole reason that we're here now? That we came from a white identity is slavery and
well, so
Jim
there's a long history of racism in this country, obviously, but I'm talking about I'm talking about people right of center who were not racists, so are not even, it might even be true to say of them that they're not racist in certainly the old sense of racism that is worth caring about. They're not white supremacists. They're not people who were frequenting the Stormfront website or any. I mean, they're just not those sorts of people. They might have even voted for Obama the first time around, or even the second time around. But they got pushed rightward by this endless culture of grievance and victimology and the endless aspersions of racism. It's not just racism. Obviously, the trans issue was a very big lever that got pulled and mattered. But all of this, the intersectional set of concerns around identity that completely subsume the politics of the left, such that in the year 2020 or 2021 or so, we achieved something like a moral panic around this, and such that when Kamala Harris, in those 100 days where she was trying to become president, had to revisit some of the positions she took in 2020 or maybe it was 2019, there was no way to utter coherent sentences so as to take the stink off of them. I mean, she was singularly bad at doing this. I mean, I think it was possible to have done that, but she and her handlers couldn't figure out how to get her to disavow her prior support for taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgery for incarcerated illegal immigrants, right? But that was the SNL sketch wrapped in an Onion article. That
you realize, that was a Trump policy, though, right? That policy was enacted under Donald Trump.
I didn't know that, but and the fact that I didn't is just yet another measure of how successful the sliming of her was. But crucially, when she was,
is that true? Because Don Lemon will say anything. Is that true? I'd love to know if that's true or not. So, anyways, let's continue.
Was asked this question point blank in an interview. She couldn't say. I mean, she was doing a tightrope walk, an intersectional tightrope walk that could not be accomplished. Right, which is what was necessary was for her to say, listen, a lot happened back there in 2019, 2020, and there were many policies that were not thought through fully, and I'm happy to talk about the trans issue or Black Lives Matter or anything else you want to talk about, but yes, if you're going to ask me if I would be for that policy now, no, I wouldn't be. Right. And people can understand how a person's position changes as long as there's some rational accounting of how they got from there to here. But if you're still living in a quasi-religious circumstance of blasphemy tests and things that simply can't be said, it makes politics impossible. So I just think we need a hard reset in the Democratic Party around so-called wokeness or identity politics, or what I would call a social justice moral panic that we experienced about 5 years ago at its peak.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. So let's just say that I don't necessarily agree with everything you said. So let's just say that you're correct.
Okay.
And you said between 2019 and 2020 and which was sort of the peak. Now just think about the entire history of this country. And then you have a sort of rejiggering, right? Recalculating where people are trying to figure out how to even things out. And let's say that goes on for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Do you think that is you think that it is okay or it is fair to say that within those couple of years that you need to reshape politics because of something which was possibly a wanting of the leveling of the playing field to play out? You think that that is a fair analysis or a fair assessment considering the history of the country, starting with how the country was started with taking the land away from Indian Americans or Native Americans, and then on with slavery. And you have hundreds of years now of that. And then within 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that all of a sudden we need to reshape our politics because people are asking for folks to understand what it is like to be a minority in this country, whether it is transgender or Black or even Jewish. Do you think that that is a fair assessment of, do you think that's fair?
Well, I mean, fairness is the
Or even
crucial-
logical, or even
Yeah.
logical.
Well, but I mean, so you're using words like fair and logical, and I mean, I think these are really, we're right to care about these principles, really at the foundation level of our thinking about anything, right? So, if you're going to track fairness and logicality, then I think you're never going to have a problem. But what was so egregious about this, about identity politics, and remains so, is that fairness.
Also, I mean, that was one of the worst asked questions I've ever heard in my life. Like weird sort of tangent words that he used to kind of get to the question. It's like, yeah, blah. Anyways,
and logicality were the first things to go out the window, right? I mean, if you want to level the playing field, it matters that you do it in a way that is fair and logical, right? So like, and not simply perpetrating the opposite harms that that have caused you.
That's
to
in an
have to
ideal
level in
world,
the first
Sam.
place.
You understand what I'm saying? You're talking about something that's in an ideal world. Our world is not ideal.
no, Don, no one understood what you were saying. It was an incoherent question that Sam just figured out. But you like racism towards one group doesn't get evened out if you're just racist then towards another group. That's just not how it fucking works. It never should work that way. You know, you don't stop people from being racist by then just going and being racist to other people. Anyways, let's go.
And the reason that we got to this moment is because of the playing of white identity politics. MAGA is the biggest identity political movement, I think, in history. And they like to call out others by saying this is identity politics, that you're playing identity politics, when they are the ones. Every accusation is a confession. MAGA, look at what's happening right now. Even what you're complaining about, the situation that we're in, that's because of identity politics. It's because of white identity politics.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's awful. I mean,
but I don't believe that a white identity politics necessarily those politics were spurred from something that happened between 2019 and 20 whatever you want to call it. I think that happened over the history of the country.
I can just tell. I can
over
just
a
tell
long
you
arc of history.
The two extremes amplify each other, right? I mean, so the far left and the far right are gifts to one another, right? I mean, they radicalize
100%. 100%.
And what we need is a
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Far left, far right, all they want to do is win, and they just keep pushing each other farther away, which is actually further and further away from where most Americans live, in sort of a moderate thing where they just want to live their life and take care of their family and do things that they love and maybe take a vacation or buy a house. And then you have all these extremes who kind of overpopulate the media landscape. And so if you just sort of watch the media or try to get news or try to get information, you're going to think that every single person on the right is this way or every single person on the left is this way, when really that's not true. Those people just get the most attention because they say the most outrageous fucking garbage. So that's the problem. Anyways, let's continue.
A vast center to our politics where people are sane and logical and fair and intellectually honest. And so, yeah, I think a lot of the stuff around.
I think a better way of putting it is where's the, so you have this urgency within the last 5 or 6 years. Where was that urgency over the last centuries, decades, centuries?
There was an appropriate urgency in, around civil rights in 1964, right, that was absolutely appropriate to that moment, and a resetting of policy of a sort that was may have been perfect there then, but didn't age so well. So I mean, look at something like affirmative action, right, or DEI at the level of policy, like for application to college or medical school, right? What was appropriate in the 60s and 70s and 80s, right, might not have been appropriate 5 years ago. And I think that's true when you look at the actual real world outcomes, right? So 5 years ago, or even 10 years ago, honestly, even 20 years ago, if you ask yourself, if you look at the full landscape of high status jobs and opportunities in our society, right? Jobs in academia or media or the philanthropic organizations. I mean, just like if you want a job at Netflix or you want a job at the Ford Foundation or Microsoft or et cetera, what did being black do for you in the application process? If you look at people of equal talent, equal training, and you just know that one is black and one is white, one is a white man and one is a black woman, right? Where were the advantages? Right now, there was a story from the Democrats that never got revised from 1964 on. I mean, Joe Biden, one of his first speeches as president was to a black college. I forget which college it was. Might have been Howard. Anyway, you could look it up. But he gave a commencement speech to a group of black college graduates. And this speech could have been written in 1966, right? He was saying things like, "You are going to have to be 200% better than the white guy to get your foot in the door," right? Everyone knew, right, and has known for many years that when you're talking about any high status job in this country, getting into Harvard Medical School, et cetera, that is a lie, right? That has been a lie for a very long time. In fact, the opposite is true. No one was more disadvantaged based purely on the superficial characteristics of skin color than white men for a very long time getting into high status. Now, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. I'm not saying there are no disadvantages to
you
black
don't believe
men.
that, do you?
Oh, it's obviously
look
true.
at the numbers. The numbers don't bear that out. That's not true. Look at the people.
The numbers
Sam,
of those
I
recruited.
operate in a circle of a lot of white people who
I would have loved for Don to just keep quiet there for a little bit so Sam could finish his full point and then Don come in. But I don't know why Sam would just lie about that. It doesn't make any sense, but let's continue.
attend Ivy League schools.
Mhm.
And a lot of the folks who their kids are attending these schools have endowment. They give money to the schools. They put libraries in the schools. They are
legacy
legacies
is
of the
also
schools.
another corruption of
And-
the system. Yeah.
And I barely, if ever, see a black person among them. Rarely.
Okay. No.
And
no,
if you look at the
true.
numbers, the numbers are not there. Look at the representation of white men and black women in every type of business, leaders
Okay,
of companies.
CEO. We have to be
CEO
systematic. We have to be systematic, and we talk in how we talk about this, Don, because the facts are there for anyone to find in terms of. I mean, just if you're going to ask yourself, like internships at the New York Times, like who has gotten those internships, right? The first rung on the ladder in recent years. And you look at the percentages that go to white men
It's
versus
all white kids who have
not true.
parents who-
It's absolutely not true.
Sam, it is. I work in the media business.
Okay, well,
it is true.
There's been research
Almost
done on
every
this. Okay,
single person
there's
is
been
someone who
research
comes from a
published
legacy
on
or
this
someone
recently.
who can
Don,
pick up the phone and call someone and say, my daughter or my son or my nephew is looking for an internship.
Yes,
and it's usually
okay.
the people that they know, and those are white kids.
You're talking about the influence of nepotism. You're talking in colleges. You just mentioned the influence of legacy admissions. All of that is true. That has not overwhelmed this other countervailing set of policies that we could go by the name of affirmative action or DEI.
When you
in,
talk about, are you sure you're
in
talking,
these
when you talk about
institutions.
DEI, do you, because diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, the number one beneficiary of diversity, equity, and inclusion is white women. And I think white men may be number two. But because diversity, equity, and inclusion is not affirmative action, those are not the same thing.
No, I know they're not the same thing, but there's an overlapping set of concerns here that
diversity, equity, and inclusion is casting
about
a wider net of people who are qualified for whatever it is. Affirmative action is more about numbers. DEI is about let's get as many qualified people in the pool than we can.
Affirmative action is more about quotas.
I mean, I think it should be pretty simple. Everyone should have equal opportunities, and the person who has the highest level of merit and skill, given all the same opportunities, should be in the position. It should be based on effort. It should be based on accountability. It should be based on merit. It should be based on skill. All these types of things should matter way, 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 way more than a superficial trait of your skin color or your gender. But it does matter because we see that. And so that, I guess, that has to be taken into account about how we can get people to have equal opportunities, never equal outcomes. That's the downfall of our society, but certainly the opportunity or the ability to do something great. I think that's important. Let's see what else they have to say.
And when misapplied, I mean, this was the famous lawsuit against Harvard, launched by Asian students, right? Which was, I mean, this is something that was objectively true, that Asian students were being discriminated against by Harvard, right? I mean, they just, if they weren't discriminated against, they would, based on their numbers and based on their cultural values and the level at which they were preparing for college, they're going to swamp the admissions of Harvard University, as they have in many other universities. And Harvard had a policy to select against them, and it was a racist policy, right? So my point is not that we shouldn't value diversity. My point is we have to be alert to the problem of perverse incentives. We have to care about alleviating the real inequalities that still exist with remedies that actually work, right? So if you care about poverty, if you care about inequality in all its forms, educational inequality, the inequality of health outcomes, right? Well, then you should be targeting those in a way that is sane and not injurious to our politics. I mean, so for instance, during COVID, we had a policy where businesses were going to be helped preferentially based on the color of the skin of the people who were the business owners, right?
Let me just say this, Sam, because I'm looking it up now. So this thing that you're talking about with Harvard, they ruled that Harvard did not intentionally discriminate against Asian American applicants, upholding their holistic admission process. While plaintiffs argue that lower personal ratings for Asian Americans indicated bias, courts found no evidence of unlawful discrimination or animus. And then again, another article says the decision did not disturb a lower court decision, because they appealed it, a lower court decision that Harvard had not illegally discriminated against Asian applicants.
It was not illegal. I mean, it was ruled that it was not illegal, but it was injurious because the ground truth exposed in that lawsuit was that for an Asian applicant to have the equivalent chance of getting into Harvard as a black applicant, all things being equal, they had to have a 400-point higher score on the SAT, right? So it's just like when facts like that come tumbling out of a lawsuit of that sort, whatever the outcome of the
I don't know if
lawsuit,
that's a fact. You had to have a 400%, but go on.
No, 400 points, yeah.
400 points, yeah.
It's just, listen, you could practice affirmative action in a way that bypass that specific concern totally. You could simply, rather than lower the requirements to get into Harvard, you could just proactively preferentially find black and brown applicants who have the same scores as the Asian applicants that you want to diminish the numbers of. I mean, if that, in fact, if you actually want a specific balance, I mean, it's a private institution. It should be free to do that if it wants to do that. But
it should be free to discriminate. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, it's unavoidable if you're trying to create a mix. If you have a notion of diversity, and it should represent. If you're saying that, I mean, this was clearly not their policy, but let's say their policy was, we want our student body to mirror the general population, and the general population in the United States has 58% white people and 14% black people and etc. So we're going to get our 14% black students in the freshman class. How do we do that? Right? There are better and worse ways to do that. Now you might think that's just an odious goal. We should be colorblind and post-racial, and we should just want good kids of whatever color in our school. That's also a defensible goal, right? And I would probably be more in line with that, frankly. But even if you just wanted to mirror society perfectly, if that were your goal, there are better and worse ways to do that. And the worst way to do that, which was the way that has been practiced with affirmative action in most places, is to lower the standards, right? And to leave people with the feeling that there's something.
Yeah, lowering the standards is the worst possible option. If you've earned the right through merit and through all the things that you need to get into, let's say we're just talking about Harvard or Ivy League schools, then you should be accepted to that university. Everything should be based on the same level of scores. Now, if certain populations or groups, I think class is better, because I think anyone who's in sort of a lower class or in poverty line has a harder time getting the opportunities, whatever color they are. So I think that should sort of be the focus, sort of a classism structure rather than a color structure. So we can help those people get the opportunities they deserve, and we can give them, a way out and something to look forward to, strive for, a mentor, a role model, so they can earn and become the best version of themselves, and strive to be the humans that they're meant to be, because everyone's made in the divine image of God. I think that's more important. But the application process should be the same for everyone. Here are the standards. This is the standards for every single person, no matter what. If you meet these standards, you get accepted. Like, well, I don't know why that's so hard. Now, if you want to encourage more people of certain colors or backgrounds to go to these schools, then you have to go into those communities and help them out and help them grow and learn and discover and have a vision for the future that might be something bigger or better than what they've currently been a product to. And I think that's important also. But it's not about discriminating and lowering the standards to other people who didn't get this. That just ruins the whole entire system and makes it worse for everyone.
Bad about affirmative action because the person got into the school on something less than their own merits, right? And it's bad for the person who got that advantage, and it's bad for everyone else's perception of them. And it's not necessary. I mean, because we could under a different system, it would be understood that no, everyone had the same scores, everyone jumped through the same hoops. We just went the extra mile to find people from each community who could do that because we cared about diversity, right? Mm-hmm. That was possible, and that's not what any of these schools tended to do.
I'm about to show you something that makes me furious every time I see it. This is a real tax return from someone making $284,900.
I don't know if they lowered the standards.
Honestly, there's been so much research done on this. I mean, it's considered poison left of center journalistically, so it's not surprising that you haven't focused on it. But if you look
I focused on it because I did one on Duke University, and if
you don't know anything about this, Don, so
found that Duke University had not lowered its standards to get minority students in or black students in. And now Harvard may be a different thing. I haven't studied Harvard's, but yeah, I do pay attention to it, and maybe I should pay a bit more attention to Harvard. But look, I'm not an Ivy League grad. I went to a state college.
The fact that we're having this difficult a time converging on facts in this conversation is to some degree a consequence of where we started, which is how our information landscape is so balkanized and weird. Right of center, there's a fever swamp that talks about nothing else but for the kind of the misuses of DEI and affirmative action, and all of it gets at a glance gets categorized as white supremacy and racist insanity the moment you get left of center. And it's understandable because yes, every racist and white supremacist has an appetite for that sort of thing, but there are also just facts that are injurious to our politics here that we have to talk about honestly. And the same, like if you and I were going to talk about the statistics around police violence, the racial, how many young black men, unarmed black men get shot by cops, right? I guarantee you we're going to grind our gears as well, because how politicized this conversation has gotten and how people don't have access to the same sets of facts.
Yeah, and the politicization of it has become the loudest and the most important thing, rather than the actual reality of it. And so
I'm very into the.
I mean, Sam Harris did an absolutely incredible video breaking down that thing he just stated. Police brutality or police violence on black people, and I think it's a video that everyone should watch. It's on his YouTube channel. It's one of his most watched videos on his YouTube channel. It breaks it down in clear science and clear data and clear facts. And I think at the beginning of the video, he said something about really not wanting to do the video, and it was interesting information that he found and all this type of stuff. But Sam Harris is someone who routinely calls out his own side, quote unquote, and I think that makes the conversation better. I mean, they're arguing about facts because Don doesn't know, or Sam doesn't know, or someone doesn't know, and this is wrong, this doesn't sound right, this is not particularly the lens we viewed these things from on the left, and Sam is saying, like, this is just how it is. And like, it's so interesting that even on your own side, it's hard for someone to even see the clear-cut information of what's true, what's not true, this is fact, that's not fact. It's very, very, very complicated.
I don't know if we would grind our gears, because look, one experience, your experience may be different. I have a lived experience of what it is like, and those experiences with officers don't always end in shootings, but they're not a positive. I haven't had much positive interaction with local law enforcement when I'm on the other side of a traffic stop or whatever. But federal agencies, who I've worked with the FBI a lot, very good interactions with them. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about something else, because I wanted to go on.
I'm sorry. I'll go wherever you want to go.
I want to talk about the president's attacks on his political enemies, or his perceived rivals, and his blatant disregard for the rule of law in covering up the Epstein files. Are you watching this Epstein files thing, and where do you think we are? What do you think of it?
Yeah, I'm just waiting to find out. I mean, obviously there's another vast tranche of millions of documents that may yet be released. A lot that has been released has been redacted. It also is taking people, understandably, a very long time to move through these emails with AI or whatever other tools they've got. I mean, we're millions of documents. It takes a long time to sift through. So I don't know what's there, and I don't know how much of the current conversation about Epstein is a kind of hysteria, analogous to the satanic cult panic we had in the 80s and I think early 90s, and how much is just where it's just as awful as anyone could fear. I mean, I know if you go far enough into the crazy conspiratorial view of this, like all the way to QAnon, obviously much of what has been alleged there and worried about there for years is frankly crazy. And I do feel that many people are prepared to believe the worst of in this case, rich guys, in a way that seems somewhat unrealistic to me. I mean, there seems to be a basic sense now forming that if you get rich guys alone on a private plane or a private island, they are going to reveal that they're basically all pedophiles. Right now, I perhaps I'll be surprised when the final email comes out and we find out that all of these guys are sleeping with kids. But somehow I think that's not going to be what we discover right now. So, which is to say that there are kind of concentric circles of awfulness here, with Epstein at the center and whatever he was up to, and anyone he trafficked young girls to. And hopefully we'll find out about all of that, and whoever can be prosecuted should be prosecuted. But I think there are far more normal, still sleazy stories to tell around, in some wider circles around all of that, where guys are sleeping with, quote, Russian models who are 22 years old, and maybe they were trafficked, and maybe there are crimes there, and maybe there's also some reputations that have to be destroyed there, etc. But it's still a different problem than taking 14-year-olds from their families and raping them. And
do you think it's a cover up? Do you think the administration is covering something up?
I do. Yes. I mean, and this is. I think there's a reason why. It's.
I mean, good point, right, by Sam, right? There has to be distinctions made by what's in the Epstein files, who's doing what, who's participating in what, who's leading the charge, who was there, what they did, how they did it, with who they did it. Like, I don't know if we're going to get all of that concrete information, but I hope we do. And like Sam said, right, if you do anything like that with anyone underage or trafficked, anything like that, or associated in that degree, prosecuted to the fullest degree of the law, absolutely 100%, no matter what. And if there were any cover-ups or this or that or governments involved, the public should be made aware of that, so that hopefully something like this can never happen again. And if the whole system has to be burned to the ground, fuck it.
It's generally a bad idea to release emails like this to the general public. I mean, this is not the way evidence should normally be handled, and I don't think anyone should just be generically in favor of this practice, right? Because a lot of people's reputations will be harmed needlessly, and these emails are very hard to understand, especially when vast parts of them have been redacted. But in this case, given how untrustworthy the current administration is, I mean, given how it is staffed with obvious lunatics and grifters and liars. I mean, people who lie as freely as they breathe, right? And we're talking about people like Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, people who got into the positions they're in by endlessly banging the drum of conspiracy around this specific story, right? I mean, this is how they got there in the first place. And then once they got into power, they said, "Oh, there's nothing to see here." And now, with this release, under duress, we see that there is very likely a lot to see. These guys can't be trusted at all. So under those conditions, I do think it's good that it's all coming out, and I do think whatever shouldn't be redacted. But generally speaking, this is not how government should work, right? This is a failure mode of our democracy we're witnessing.
I'm curious to your reaction was to the administration indicting me and other journalists who covered the Minneapolis church protest.
Well, again, this is another case where the hypocrisy on display really can't be exaggerated, right? We're talking about people who cared about things like or pretended to care about things like the Twitter files, right? I mean, the idea that having then candidate Joe Biden ask Twitter to remove naked photos of his son, right? This was just an Orwellian encroachment of government into the First Amendment freedom of ordinary civilians and their companies, right? I mean, this is just so awful that it's the story of the decade, right? But now we have an administration that's literally arresting journalists for doing journalism, right? And people, right of center will, seemingly not bat an eye, right? So it's. I mean,
I saw some stuff, on X about Don Lemon. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know what he did. That's not a story that I followed or cared to talk about or cared to think about. Obviously, he's fine. He's having an interview right now with Sam Harris. So I don't really know the inside details of his situation there, but maybe they'll get shared.
It's a terrible precedent. I don't know perhaps you've talked about it on your podcast already ad nauseum. So don't say whatever you want to say or not here. But I'd be interested to know what your experience has been and what is still looming in front of you as far as the implications of having come under the attention of the administration in this way.
Well, what I can say is that I went to Minneapolis to do journalism. I went and followed the protesters to do journalism. I went into the church to do journalism, and I continued throughout that day doing journalism, interviewing people, and that's what I've been doing ever since. I think that the First Amendment, freedom of expression, but mainly for me in this case, freedom of the press, it's the bedrock of our democracy, and it's the bedrock of for journalists. If you have an administration or people in government deciding what reporters and what journalists can cover, which protests you can cover and which protests you cannot cover, which war you can cover, which war you cannot cover, which Epstein file story you can cover and which one you cannot cover, then journalism is over. And, we're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. That's how I feel. So look, I stand by what I did. I stand by journalism. I'm going to fight it. I stand by the First Amendment. I'm going to fight it until, the last breath in my body. And I do believe that I'm going to prevail. And I think that someone has to stop this administration's assault on the First Amendment, on the Constitution.
But Don, what does that look like when you say you're going to fight it? I mean, many people say that in this case, these kinds of cases, the process is itself the punishment. Right?
That's what I said.
It can be bankrupting of you.
Yeah.
I mean, so is it possible to fight something like this without incurring massive personal expense? I mean, I'm actually talking about dollars here.
No, I don't think it. You'd have to ask other people, but in my case, I don't think it's possible to fight it in a way that you want to without resources. But you should know there are many places for resources out there, and I'm not speaking specifically about me, but there are, there are people who journalism freedom and civil rights and First Amendment freedom organizations that will help in these cases. And I believe that there are probably some attorneys who will take it on pro bono. But that's not in every single case. But I think that, and I think it's important that it did happen to someone who has some agency, because imagine the people who don't. And the people who are being pulled off of the streets without due process, many of them American citizens, and they don't have the resources to fight it. They don't have a platform to be able to talk about it. So look, this is bigger than Don Lemon. It's about me, but it's not really about me. This is really about the health of this country and this republic and what the ideals that our country was founded on.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
See ya.
Yeah, and the degree to which our institutions, both journalistic and legal, have bent the knee to Trump. I mean, that has been one genuine source of surprise. I mean, that was, if the lawyers, if the most well-resourced law firms are going to be among the first to bend the knee, as many were, that really is an ominous sign. And I mean, you have certain journalistic properties. I mean, obviously, journalism in some quarters is fairly healthy, but in others, I could name the Washington Post, is showing signs of real stress. I mean, given what has happened of late, it's I mean, we need. Social media is definitely not enough. I mean, just having people out there with their iPhones is insufficient.
It's not enough. But the reason that we're able to do what we're doing, to go back and forth with each other, and people probably think we don't like each other. I happen to like you very much. We just disagree on some things, and that's how it should be. You know what I'm saying? We should be able to discuss these things without someone wanting to have a vendetta against someone.
Well, obviously, of course, you should be able to, but it doesn't mean the conversations ever end up being productive, right? You guys these two guys have disagreed on quote unquote facts throughout this episode, specifically relating to race and white men and affirmative action and things of that nature. But of course, you should be able to have these conversations. Joe Rogan says that all the time on his podcast, right? We're just having a conversation. Candace Owens just says, I'm just asking questions. Well, at some point, you have to actually get down to the facts and present the facts in a way that people understand them and that they can make a better decision about their life. And so that's important too. And so if every person has a podcast and every single person has a platform and those people speak with conviction and confidence and charisma, then they're going to be easy to follow, and then everything they say could be seen as fact. And so you see that with Tucker Carlson, you see that with Candace Owens, and they spell and spew half-truths that sort of bend this and make sense here, but don't make sense here, and then they're full of shit most of the time, and then it's like, well, people believe them anyways. And so it's very hard for the regular person to discern what is right, what is wrong, and where do I lie, and what do I think, and who should I vote for, and how do I live my best life, and what can I do to get better, and all these types of things. Of course, you should be able to have a conversation. That's the whole point of life. Life is about building relationships. If you can't build relationships, you don't really have a life. Of course, that's the cornerstone of living the good life is great relationships. And great relationships lead to having conversations and holding people accountable. But that's not really what the aim of what we're at. We're after getting attention, because we want more clicks on our content, so we can make more money. And that's really the issue. And that's what social media has done. Because there's no gatekeeping. You can't gatekeep. Anyone can open up an Instagram account, a YouTube account, and say whatever the fuck they want. And that's wild. Cool, but wild. It's why I have a job. It's why I'm able to do this right now. But it's also wild at the same time. Anyways, let's continue.
That
10 minutes
they
left.
don't agree with. The Trump administration has not liked me, during the first administration. They haven't liked me during the second administration. And now they feel like, okay, well, now we can go after him. And they will, because they feel that they can do it with impunity. And quite honestly, they have bad people who are in place in leadership roles in this administration. But I want to ask you,
that's been the most insidious thing about the biggest difference between the second and first Trump administrations. But here, you've had a proper purge of everyone with integrity, everyone who had a commitment to the real norms of our democracy and to just the Constitution itself, right? I mean, you just have these true believers and loyalists in places of ultimate responsibility. I mean, Stephen Miller and Pam Bondi on down, and it's shocking how it's shocking that that our system is as reliant on the personal integrity of individuals as it is. I mean, you'd like to imagine we have a system that of laws and institutions that is so bulletproof against idiocy and personal corruption that it could survive contact with these kinds of characters. But if it survives contact, it can't survive contact indefinitely with it. I mean, clearly we have norms in places where we wish we had laws, and it'll be the job of some new sane administration, hopefully in 2028, to try to shore this up in ways that prevent this from happening again.
I want to ask you about that, but just real quick, because I forgot, I wanted to ask you during the Epstein files. Are you in the Epstein files?
I am, in a way that genuinely surprised me. I mean, I knew I had met him once. I met him at a TED conference. I talked about this on my podcast and perhaps others, where it was a lunch with maybe 12 people, and he was one, and he was bouncing on his knee an attractive woman who did not look to be underage. But I mean, the scene was such that to take one look at him and kind of the mismatch between who he was in his own mind and how he was actually coming across to the group. I mean, he clearly thought he was coming across like Cary Grant, but he just seemed like a total sleazebag, right? I mean, it's just these were not newlyweds. I mean, he's basically in some kind of sugar daddy situation with this young woman, and it just one glance at him made me think, "All right, this is a guy I really don't want to spend a lot of time with."
Where were you?
This is at the TED conference. I think it was.
Okay.
I think it was in Vancouver that year.
So how'd you end up in the files?
But I was unaware of ever having had contact with him. I had no memory of it. But apparently, he sent me an email after that lunch saying, "Hey, we met at the TED conference. I'd love to get you to dinner with my friends Woody Allen and Noam Chomsky." Apparently, he dangled Woody Allen and Noam Chomsky as bait to a lot of people. I've seen a bunch of emails of that sort. But anyway, I was invited to dinner with Woody Allen and Noam Chomsky. Again, I have no memory of this. So this is actually kind of humbling to just realize that what you can easily forget from a decade ago. And apparently, I wrote my response was only if you film it, smiley face. And by that I meant
It'd be a good conversation.
I mean, so that was a response that could have gotten me in trouble. You might imagine, but I had a war with Noam Chomsky by email. I think just a month before, right? And so Chomsky and I were just really like proper enemies at this point. And so what I clearly meant was, like, if you're going to put me in a room with Chomsky, this is just going to be an MMA fight. There's no reason to do this privately, right? But then I clearly wasn't into the guy, and he wrote back, oh, now I see what you meant by only if we film it, and he was kind of trying to follow up, and I never responded to that email, so that didn't happen. But what was interesting is that I honestly have zero memory of that exchange. And I would think I would remember being invited and essentially passing up a dinner with Noam Chomsky and Woody Allen. But again, no memory of that. So I think there are a lot of
believe
people.
you because I meet a lot of people and they said, yeah, I was on your show back in such and such. And I'm like,
yeah, right. Yeah. But there are a lot of people in these files who have different degrees of entanglement with him and different degrees of culpability. And I think the moral panic part of this that I worry about is that, it's understandable that many people look at this and they say, well, I hate all these guys. I want them all destroyed, right? Like this is we're looking at a culture of impunity and entitlement and misogyny and just awfulness. Let's just hang them all, right? I don't care who gets fired, who loses their deals, what marriages unravel, etc., right? And that is an understandable degree of outrage, but it is actually not a good thing for us culturally. It's not it's not a set of really ethical intuitions that you want to stand behind going forward for the next situation. And there are people who just got named for, in a way that, like, if I had a different place in the world, I could worry about, my harmless email here, which signaled my lack of my disinclination to have anything to do with the guy. I could worry that I might get fired, right? If I were in a conventional situation of employment, and I'm sure there are people who have been fired for merely being named here, and that no one should celebrate that. That's just not the way justice gets done. As awful as many of the details are in these emails.
Well, let me ask you this: you referenced it. Are you a Democrat, right? You're a Democrat?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we, as a country, recover from all of this, Sam? In your estimation, I don't think that Democrats winning back the House and even the Senate in November is going to be enough. And I don't think that a Democrat winning in 2028 will be enough as well, since that there's going to be a real moral rot in the soul of America right now for maybe ever or quite a long time. So how do we get it back? Or do we?
Well, we've covered many of the topics that I think are relevant here. I mean, I do think that the overarching concern is that we have to break the spell of tribalism and dogmatism here,
Good luck
right?
with
Like
that.
we have to notice how.
Yes, we have to break those two things of dogmatism and tribalism, of course, but we also need a universal moral compass where there's a set of values and core beliefs that we all sort of adhere to so that we can all aim to become the best version of ourselves in greatest service to the world. We can also have reciprocal cooperative relationships, even though we might disagree on certain tenets, but we have a core fundamental universal moral compass that leads us in the same direction, and that we aim to try and leave the world a little bit better than we found it. Now, I don't know if that's possible or what that looks like, but man, we need something like that we can distinguish between good and evil, and also have that gray area that we can discuss in certain regards.
Toxic those variables become. I mean, this is where you're smearing your opponent even when they're right, simply because they're your opponent and you're just trying to win at any cost, right? At any cost to your own integrity. Doesn't matter that you're contradicting principles you said you stood by last week or last year. I mean, that kind of politics is a race to the bottom. It just is. And so we have to be intellectually honest. We have to be, when our own side does the wrong thing, we have to admit that it was just as wrong when we were complaining about it when the other side did it.
Well, we talked about politics, and my dogs are agreeing with you, I think. We talked about politics and we talked about race. Do you think religion plays a role in this?
It does. It does. I mean, it often plays a very unhelpful one, because religion is the one area of our culture where both tribalism and dogmatism just get frankly celebrated, right? Whereas they're not even considered negatively valenced things, right? Like, I mean, if you in science, if you call someone dogmatic, that's just a pure insult. Right. If you say, oh, that's just a dogma, that's just synonymous for, that's a completely unfounded set of claims that, no one should be anchored to. Right. But in religion, dogma is actually a good word. I mean, it's just a Catholic word for the things you believe, despite the fact that you don't have good evidence for those things. And so it is with tribalism. I mean, tribalism, when you say someone's being merely tribal, that's a negatively valenced claim. I mean, it's a sign that they're not being honest, that they're not actually using any kind of principle of charity with people they disagree with, that they're just trying to win. It's all about power, right? It's not about, really making contact with reality and being, and cooperating toward sane ends. But in religion, tribalism just becomes, the basic in-group, out-group piece of software you're using. Like, listen, we're evangelicals together, and we're at odds with everyone else who's not supporting our narrow project or whatever it is. So I do think we have to get out of this business of being deeply anchored to our teams, right? And I mean, like the sports metaphor, the metaphor to being what it's like to be a sports fan is actually useful to consider, because I'm not saying, when I say identity politics is toxic, I'm not saying that we have to get rid of identity in every sense, right? Or pretend that,
That's why the word fan comes from fanatic. And that's what people are. They're fanatics for their side. And no matter what, there are certain people who will never call out their own side, no matter how horrible or despicable or dogmatic the behavior is. And that is a serious issue.
it doesn't matter if somebody is Indian or Jewish or whatever. I mean, like if it matters to you, if you care about your ethnicity or your, the country of origin or your religion or even your race, okay, great. Care about that to whatever degree. But we know what it's like to care too much, right? I mean, it's fine. Care about the Yankees versus the Red Sox, right? That's fun. That's adding color to your life, and it's a diversion. Great. It's part of our culture. Great. But we know what it's like when sports fandom becomes real fanaticism and becomes deranging. When a soccer player scores an own goal.
Yeah, we see it all the time. Well, I see it all the time in sports. Someone misses a field goal. Someone, a closer, blows the game. It's like they get death threats from people. This is the same type of issue. They get messages from other human beings that live in this world that are so fanatical about their sports team that they send this human being death threats. And sports are just another part of life where people make mistakes because they're human beings and we all make mistakes, and they get death threats. They'll murder their family. I'll kill your firstborn. All of this crazy shit. This is where sports fandom becomes super unhealthy, and it goes into the fanatic stage. And we see this type of dichotomy or dilemma, in almost everything, and definitely in the political space as well. This is a ridiculous part of the sports world. I've been part of the sports world my whole life. I was a baseball player and a professional wrestler and all these types of things, and I see this all the time. You cannot live and die by your sports team. You can enjoy it, you can watch it, you can love it, you can talk about it, but living and dying by that is not the way to life. It should be about your health and your happiness and your prosperity and your relationships and your purpose in life. And, having a sports team that you enjoy is important and can be important. It can be fun. But if we get to the point where we're sending other human beings death threats because they missed a fucking field goal, then we've gone off the edge. And we got to pull ourselves back from the brink and think about how we want to reorientate our life. And it's the same thing about the stuff that Sam has been talking about here with dogma and tribalism and moving forward as a country and becoming better.
In the World Cup and comes back to his country and gets murdered by some crazy fan, that's when sports fandom has been taken too far. And unfortunately, religion is a version of fandom that is often taken too far. I mean, the religious sectarianism runs so deep in our world that you can find endless examples of people taking it way too far. And insofar as our politics it resembles religion, it's awful. And so I think we need to break the spell of sectarianism and tribalism and identity politics across the board, and become much lighter in how we hold these divisions between ourselves and others.
I agree, but I don't know how we do that, how that's possible, what the solution is, what the protocol is, what the steps forward are. I agree, Maybe Don's about to say that, and maybe Sam at some point will lay out those. This interview's almost over, but maybe he has some ways forward that we can have solutions to these issues.
Enjoyed the conversation, Sam.
Yeah.
Come back.
Nice to see you,
Thank
Don.
you. Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks.
Best of luck with everything.
You too. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.
All right, see you, Don. But yeah, that was a good sort of wrap up to that. Let's see, we had a layout. That was a good wrap up to that conversation. I enjoyed it. I mean, I don't find Don Lemon to be particularly insightful or wise. I don't really know what his previous career was before he just started being basically on social media and YouTube. I don't know what he did before that. I don't know what his background is. I don't really follow his stuff. But again, don't really find him particularly a good interviewer or particularly like insightful or wise, but it is what it is. He has a platform, so cool for him. But I like Sam Harris. I watch a lot of his stuff. I react to a lot of his stuff. I stream a lot of his stuff. His stuff on meditation and consciousness and mindfulness is where I really got to know him. And of course, he talks about political issues a lot, and he's been a staunch supporter of Israel as well. So I've listened to his stuff on that as well. But enjoyed the conversation. It was a good hour and 20 minutes of my time. So if you stayed with me throughout the whole stream, thank you very much. I appreciate you very much. And wherever you're watching or listening or watching or whatever, please like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. And if you're interested in my podcast, which about 90% of the episodes are about mindset, mental health, and personal development, then text me at my number 201-534-3681. Say you came from this stream, and I will send you the episode of your choosing, whether you want goals, habits, self-image, depression, bipolar disorder, anything like that. We did our most recent episode that I released is 10 things men should stop doing. So maybe you're interested in that, or text me, say you came from the stream, you want to hang out. Cool, great, love that. But I will see you guys on the next one. Have a great day and take care of yourself.